Going back to your childhood, did you ever visit galleries as a child, school visits or anything like that?
I can't remember doing a great deal. I think the only thing I remember doing is probably at school, George Spencer, we may have done a trip to London to the National Gallery. So I think we could probably did that a couple of times, 2 trips to London. But nothing in the region. I don't know what we had. Probably Nottingham Castle maybe as well, but I don't remember it significantly as a child. Which, again, ironically, so obviously as an artist, I do, everywhere I go now, I do go to galleries within that city, town. And I go to museums. Some of it is probably dropped off museums because some of them end up being quite repetitive in some ways, but I do enjoy spending time in galleries.
Has there been any major changes in the arts sector which has affected your work? So that's quite a broad question. So take from it what you will, and then I'll maybe steer you.
Well, you part steer me, like you say, it is a broad question. So what are you after there?
Well, if we look at more recent happenings, then if we look at the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath of that, I call it the George Floyd flurry, where institutions and organisations all wanted to show that they were down with Black Lives Matter, they were, supporting inclusivity. I consider that to be a change. Has that affected your work in any way?
My work or the arts per se?
The arts sector, and then I suppose the arts sector, but in turn, have you seen any benefits from that?
Yes, I think there has been changes, and whether they are significant and permanent, who knows, we'll see over time. But actually, there was a person actually said to me recently about other arts organisations or even a number of organisations where she's used this term blackwashing. So there is this narrative around equality, diversity and inclusion, and we have this conversation with primary and other institutions, which is good, and I think it's good that they are high up there on the agenda. But then it's following through some of it, and even like I say, primary, we have this conversation, and I'm in the process of writing information to staff and board as we speak. But it is about kind of almost not, because elements of it is window dressing, and then it's kind of deep within the organisations, and I think that's the next step for a lot of organisations. You've got your statements, you put your statements out 2020, there's some kind of programming shifts happened, which is fine, but then it's part about employment. Black people need jobs, black people need to pay for school uniform and send the kids to school, blah, blah, blah. So that it's that commitment to a wider diverse society, and I'm not quite sure we're there with the arts yet. But okay, it's good, like I say, Sonia and Simone Lee winning the Golden Lion. That's all has a trickle-up effect in some ways, but whether it's enough and fast enough, who knows?
So thinking about, because as Nottingham Black Archive, we're very much concerned with the local. So looking at the local arts landscape, what would you like to see being done differently? The
local venues who can see across the board in terms of Nottingham Contemporary, Nottingham Castle, and we're here in Lakeside as well, is this taking this kind of programming on a commitment to it long term. So it's not just your one-off shows, it is kind of this rolling program, commitment to diversity. Which, again, hopefully, over time, we will see. I don't know, obviously, Nottingham Contemporary, they're in the process of selecting a new director. It's had a reasonable diverse programme, but I think, again, it could do more. I think as an organisation, it could lift the artists from the city, particularly, again, a range of diverse artists from the city. It's not done that as far as I'm concerned. In 14 years, have shown 2 artists from the city, and they're both white. They could do more, and same with the castle, and no art exchange. And okay, it is about diversity per se, but then equally it could be lifting more artists from the city and bringing them up onto national and international stage. And I don't think even that organisation has done enough of that today.
Yeah, I would agree definitely with the tenure of the previous CEO, but I think things are changing at New Art Exchange. So what you're saying is there needs to be greater inclusivity. Is that from the top, from the board, from the managers? Is this where you think that the change needs to happen?
It's all of it. It is very much about the board and then the board having confidence to steer staff appropriately. But it's almost, getting back to primary, but I will say it is that I'm the chair and the black as the board member, but then this conversation around inclusion and diversity generally is still always sparked by me as opposed to the kind of the wider board taking the conversation. So I don't know Nottingham Contemporary's board, I don't know Nottingham Castle's board, Lakeside board. So again, I don't know, but then you've got to hope that the board ends up being more diverse and then starts taking on these conversations. At this moment in time, I'm not completely confident that the range of organisations are going to be doing that going forward.
Yeah, well, I can definitely tell you that the Castle's board is not diverse. Well, as you know, I was a board member for primary, and so I kind of have the experience of seeing what primary was made of, and primary is set in the heart of the inner city, if we still use that term. But if I look at the staff at primary, I think you only have one black member of staff in an organisation in such a diverse area. And things like that for me are a concern when there's only one black member of staff, because then how can change happen? So I think it is a real big issue, and we could talk about this from now to forever.
Yeah, very much so. And I accept what you say about primary, and again, in terms of the city and the profile and the level of funding we get, we're a dot within the city, primary to a degree, and clearly the amount of money coming into, say, Nottingham Contemporary, the Castle, and New Art Exchange, you'd expect those organisations definitely to be doing more.
I'm deviating slightly from the questions, but I would actually expect any organisation, regardless of what their budget is, to be thinking about diversity and inclusion, and to be thinking about that seriously, regardless, because primary does have a mandate to serve the local community. It does get public money, so even if that budget isn't as big as the Contemporaries or the Lakeside, it still has that duty and that responsibility. But I think you know me.
I hear you loud and clear, and I'm vocal as very much as anybody else.
But we'll park that for a minute. I'm sure we'll come back to that. I want to come back to you and art. And have there been any particular people who have been influential in your career?
A range of people from, like I say, educational institutions. There's one or two people who strongly support you and respond to your work well, from, like I say, the foundation course to the degree at NTU and the MA at RCA. And then, like I say, a lot of people I listen to and see either on YouTube or some videos, artists, watch a lot of artists there, and then their shows and their practice. So, like I say, Kerry James Marshall has been very influential, and to a degree, and then it's almost, they've been really strong mentors, but then you move on and you next either need somebody else for your next travel or your next stage of practice. So a range of artists, and like I say, when I look at art across the board, and it's not about race per se. For me, it is about interest in contemporary art practice. But equally, I look at museum shows, so again, it's not even just contemporary art. I look at the old masters as much as anybody else.
Did you ever move to a different country to advance your artistic practice?
I've spent a year in New York. I did a residency at an institution called the ISCP, International Studio and Curatorial Program. Again, that was very influential. I had a really good year, got a residency, got some funding support from Arts Council, and I ran around New York for a year, looking at shows, developing practice, you make your contacts, so that was really good. For me, again, like next steps, this Nottingham's all right as a city, a working city, but I have reservations about visibility, as I say, and to a degree, even now, you can feel invisible in the city on a national and international stage for contemporary art practice. So, whether I need more presence in London, which I feel I do, that's what I'm exploring further. Whether that's, I don't know, it's not necessarily needs a full move to London, but how do I have more presence there?
So are there any societies or organisations which exist that can support you in this endeavour? Do you know of any? Or is it a case of you battling it out as an individual?
Well, it's a kind of the network, it's a whole networking process of art. So not necessarily organisations, but kind of having more contacts in London, I think. I've got a potential show in place at Saatchi Gallery, but again, it's still confirming dates and moving that forward. And that, clearly, if that comes off, that will have a significant impact. I've got, again, the other side of the country, I've got a show in place at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, yet to confirm dates, but they are committed to a solo show there. So that has an impact. And then it's clearly shows, networking, and people committing to, again, further shows and resources as well. The process of, like this show here at Lakeside, Neil put funding in place to develop work. That allows me to develop work, but equally developing work means developing my practice. So that's very important as well, is resources to develop work and practice.
Just going back to primary, can you tell me just a little bit about how you founded primary and how that came about and what you want primary to achieve or what primary does achieve for you?
So it's been a kind of almost nearly a 20-year journey. So I literally contacted 5 people in the city, Nottingham, who I was very conscious that artists in the city had temporary spaces, and then they was losing them when the building was either demolished or their landlord wanted to convert. And that's a national as well as an international thing. Artists occupy buildings until the developer or the landlord wants to convert. So I was very conscious that it required us to have ownership of a building or land. So I contacted, me and one other, her name was Jo Naylor at the time, who's died, but we contacted about 3 or 4 people who was very proactive in the city. Mick Godley, Nicky Russell, Simon Withers, and New Art Exchange came on as a partner later. So we formed this organisation, we formed the company called Nottingham Studios, and then we kind of moved forward trying to get a building or land to build a building, and that's, like I say, took a process of up until from 2003 to 2011 to eventually get offered the building primary. But on that process was being offered land, and then it was taken away, being offered buildings, and then being taken away. But then, because we got a commitment from the City Council and David Trimble, support from David Trimble at the time, we got the building primary. Initially, we got it on a 30-year lease. with the right to buy, and so we had the first right to buy, and there was a covenant that it was only could be used for artist studios. So with that right to buy, we got support from Arts Council England, and we applied for their capital to purchase a building, which we did in